A tree suddenly falls in the forest, leaving an elderly man helpless and trapped. When all seems lost, a wild horse emerges from the shadows, and its reaction leaves everyone speechless. A thick mist covered Golden Ridge like a dense veil that morning, enveloping the ancient trees in profound silence. Jack Thompson, an elderly man with calloused hands and attentive eyes, adjusted himself in his wheelchair before setting out on the trail he had known since boyhood. Even after losing the use of his legs years ago, he never stopped visiting the woods. For him, the ridge wasn't just a piece of land, but a living entity, ancient and full of secrets that few knew how to decipher. That morning he felt something different in the air, a premonition that had been bothering him since the moment he awoke. Before leaving, he passed by Mother Sarah's house, the village healer, who observed him with an enigmatic expression. "Going to the ridge today, Jack?" "The sky looks heavy," she said, calmly stirring an herbal tea that exhaled a strong, sweet aroma. "Something's calling me today, Sarah. I can't quite explain it, but I need to go." The healer nodded as if understanding something beyond words. The ridge chooses who it calls, and when it calls, we must answer. She handed him a small leather pouch. "Take this. You might need it." Jack stored the package without questioning. He had known Sarah for enough decades to know that her intuitions were rarely wrong. The village of Golden Ridge was waking slowly. On the porches of colorful houses, some residents were already preparing breakfast while children ran through the dirt roads. Everyone greeted Jack with respect. For many there, he was more than an elder. He was the guardian of the ridge's stories, the man who kept the old traditions alive. As he passed the local market, he encountered Anthony, his only son, organizing merchandise in the small store he managed. "Dad, don't you think it's risky to go to the ridge alone today?" "The weather doesn't look good," Anthony commented, with his usual concern. "My son, the ridge knows me better than I know myself. And today it's calling me." Anthony sighed, resigned. "At least take the radio communicator I gave you." Jack nodded, more to calm his son than because he believed he would need it. In truth, he knew there was no signal in the denser part of the forest, but saw no reason to feed worries. As he moved away from the village, he noticed a figure watching him from afar. Hannah, his 17-year-old granddaughter, was standing under the shade of a mango tree. Her eyes, identical to her deceased grandmother's, carried the same intensity, the same inexplicable connection with nature. She raised her hand in a silent wave, and Jack returned it. There was something in her gaze that seemed to echo his own premonition. He continued down the narrow trail where damp leaves made the path slippery. His movement required effort, but he was accustomed to it. With patience and skill, he advanced over the uneven terrain while the sun timidly appeared through the treetops. The ridge was quieter than usual. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth, only the sound of his wheelchair, cutting through the path and the light whistle of wind among the branches. He had learned over the years that the silence of the forest was not always a good sign. As he progressed, he recalled fragments of his life, his childhood running freely among the ancient trees, his grandfather teaching him the names of each plant, each animal, the day he met Mary, his late wife, picking flowers on the hillside, the mine accident that took away the movement of his legs, and mainly the day his grandfather on his deathbed whispered in his ear, "The Ridge Guards, secrets, my son, and you have been chosen to protect them." Further ahead, approaching a clearing where he liked to rest, he noticed something unusual. The shadows of the trees seemed to stretch strangely, forming indistinct figures on the ground. A feeling of unease ran up his spine, and he felt a pressure in his chest as if he were being watched. Even so, he moved forward. The air was dense, heavy with the strong smell of wet earth and old wood. When he reached the center of the clearing, everything happened too quickly. The loud crack of splitting wood echoed through the space. That tree, with a wide trunk and deep roots, suddenly tilted in his direction. He tried to maneuver his chair, but the uneven ground prevented any chance of escape. Within seconds, impact. The weight of the trunk crushed part of the metal structure of the chair and pinned him to the ground, immobilizing his leg. Pain spread like lightning through his body, but despair came first. He shouted for help, But the ridge responded only with the same sepulchral silence. Night was still distant, but the dense tree cover prevented the sun from adequately illuminating the area. Time passed slowly, and he felt energy draining from his body. No sign of rescue, no living soul nearby, until he heard it. Hooves on the damp soil, a rhythmic trot that echoed through the forest. The sound grew in intensity, approaching ever closer. Jack tried to turn his face to see better, but the angle made it difficult. All he could perceive was a shadow moving between the trees. When the silhouette finally emerged, his heart raced. It was a horse. Not just any horse, but a Mustang with chestnut coat and black mane, shining unusually under the little light that penetrated the forest. The animal stopped a few meters away, staring at him with deep eyes, dark as night. Jack held his breath. The horse showed no fear or hesitation. On the contrary, its presence conveyed something different, a stateliness that bordered on the supernatural. It came closer, sniffing the air, assessing the situation. Then, to the old man's complete astonishment, it began to act. First, it dug around the branches with calculated movements, clearing away vegetation that hindered the removal of the trunk. Then, it positioned itself laterally and, with a firm push, displaced part of the fallen wood. Each movement was precise, as if it knew exactly what to do. When the weight finally eased and Jack managed to pull his leg free, he felt a mixture of pain and disbelief. With no strength to move on his own, he stared at the horse, which remained there, motionless. The animal's gaze was different, laden with something he couldn't describe. In an unexpected gesture, the horse lowered its head and extended its muzzle toward him, as if waiting for something. Jack understood. With effort, he held onto the soft mane and with difficulty managed to support himself on the animal's back. As soon as he was secure, the horse began to walk. The trail they followed wasn't the one leading back to the village. It was a narrow, ancient path that Jack had never traveled before. Even so, he trusted. The wind whispered among the high branches, and shadows moved along the sides of the trail. He felt they weren't alone, that something else was watching them, but couldn't discern what. "You're not an ordinary horse, are you?" Jack whispered, holding firmly to the animal's mane. In response, the horse whinnied softly, an almost melodic sound that echoed among the trees. Jack felt a shiver run up his spine. He remembered then the stories his grandfather told about the ridge's guardians, ancient spirits that took animal forms to protect those who truly belonged to these lands. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the vegetation became denser and the air heavier. Flowers Jack had never seen before sprouted from the moist ground, exhaling a sweet and intense perfume. Small lights, similar to fireflies, floated around them, illuminating the path. Suddenly the horse stopped before a very ancient-looking rock formation. Engraved on the stone, stylized figures told a story that Jack couldn't completely comprehend. He recognized Native American symbols, drawings of animals, and in the center, the figure of a man in a chair similar to his, surrounded by forest spirits. This looks like me," he murmured, amazed. The horse snorted, as if agreeing. For Jack, it was as if a piece of an ancient puzzle had finally fit into place. Something was awakening in his memory. Half-forgotten conversations with his grandfather, legends whispered in his ear when he was still a child. "Is that why I've always felt this call from the ridge? Is that why I've never been able to stay away even after the accident?" While observing the inscriptions on the rock, the pouch Mother Sarah had given him began to warm against his chest. Upon opening it, he found an amulet made of dark wood, carved with the same symbols he now saw on the stone. In the center of the amulet, a small green stone glowed with its own light. Sarah knew, he concluded. She always knew. The horse whinnied again, this time with more force, as if wanting to alert him to something. When Jack raised his eyes from the stone, he noticed that the sky had suddenly darkened. It wasn't night approaching, but dense, dark clouds forming over the ridge. "We need to go back," he said, storing the amulet. "Something else is coming." Without hesitation, the horse resumed its march, this time at a more urgent rhythm. Night was approaching when he finally spotted Mother Sarah's house, the only light on amidst the growing darkness. The healer was On the porch, as if she already knew he would arrive. Mother Sarah's expression showed no surprise, only understanding. The horse stopped gently in front of the house, and with the same care it had demonstrated in rescuing him, allowed Jack to slide to the ground. As soon as he touched the soil, he felt a slight vibration under his feet, a pulse that seemed to come from the earth itself. Before he could react, the horse whinnied softly and unhurriedly went back the way it had come, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. "It brought you back." "I knew it would," said Sarah, helping him into the small wooden house. The interior was illuminated by aromatic candles that cast dancing shadows on walls covered with dried herbs, amulets, and ancient images. While treating his wounds with an herbal ointment, Sarah observed Jack's face carefully, as if looking for signs of something deeper than physical injuries. "What did you see in the ridge today, Jack?" He hesitated, not knowing where to begin. "I saw things I can't explain, Sarah. The horse, it saved me when the tree fell. It took me on paths I'd never seen before. And there were inscriptions on a rock. They showed me." She nodded, as if already expecting this answer. "The Guardian has finally revealed itself to you." "Guardian?" Jack felt the amulet weigh in his pocket. Sarah rose and walked to an old chest in the corner of the room. From inside, she took out a book with a worn cover and yellowed pages. Upon opening it, Jack recognized the same symbols he had seen engraved on the forest rock. "Long ago, before even our grandparents were born, these valleys and mountains were protected by guardian spirits," Sarah began, running her wrinkled fingers over the pages of the book. "Each guardian took the form of a sacred animal to communicate with the chosen one among humans. The guardian of the ridge has always manifested as a wild horse." "But why me? Why now?" "The last human guardian of the ridge was your grandfather, Jack. When he departed this world, the horse spirit waited for the next chosen one. You were always destined since childhood. Your accident in the mine, which many considered a misfortune, was actually a calling. The ridge, separating you from the outside world, preparing you for your true purpose." The revelation hit Jack like a blow. He remembered the recurring dreams he'd had since the accident. He always saw himself mounted on a wild horse, traveling unknown trails of the ridge, feeling inexplicably complete, as if he had recovered something he had lost. "And the amulet you gave me today?" Sarah smiled. "It belonged to your grandmother, who received it from her mother, and so on for generations. The women in your family were always sensitive, able to feel the energy of the earth. The amulet is a conductor, a link between you and the Guardian." "But what is expected of me now? What should I do?" Sarah's expression became grave. "The ridge is in danger, Jack. There are people who want to exploit its riches, destroy its ancient magic. Last week, men from the city came to take measurements on the east side. They spoke of rare minerals, of development opportunities." A chill ran down Jack's spine. The east side of the ridge was precisely where he had seen the inscriptions on the rock. "And there's more," continued Sarah. "Hannah, your granddaughter, has been having visions that worry me. She sees shadows advancing over the ridge, trees falling, the earth bleeding." "Hannah? But she never told me anything." "She's afraid, Jack. Afraid of not being understood. Just as you were when you were young and felt the ridge's call." Jack remembered the enigmatic look his granddaughter had given him that morning, as if she knew what was to come. Hannah had always been a different girl, more connected to nature than to people. Since she was small, she preferred to spend hours exploring the ridge's trails than playing with other children. "Do you believe Hannah has also been chosen?" Sarah carefully closed the book. "I believe the blood of the Guardians runs in her veins, and that in times of great threat, the ridge may choose more than one protector." A distant thunder broke the silence of the night, making the candles flicker. The storm was approaching. "Tonight, sleep here," said Sarah. "Tomorrow, you must speak with your granddaughter, and then return to the Rock of Inscriptions. There is more for you to learn, much more." While Sarah prepared an improvised bed, Jack took the amulet from his pocket. By candlelight, the green stone in the center seemed to pulse, as if it had a life of its own. Upon touching it, he felt a current of energy course through his body, connecting him to something greater, older, more powerful than he had ever imagined. In the village, Hannah woke suddenly, sitting up in bed with her heart racing. She had dreamed of her grandfather mounted on a shining horse, crossing the forest amid a storm, and in some inexplicable way, she felt that nothing would ever be the same again. The sun was rising on the horizon when Jack awoke in Mother Sarah's house. During the night, the storm had passed, leaving behind an aroma of wet earth and renewal. On the table beside the improvised bed, he found a still warm tea and a note written in the healer's shaky handwriting. Gone to the market. Back soon. Drink the tea, it will strengthen body and spirit. After drinking the bitter and invigorating liquid, Jack headed home in a spare wheelchair that Sarah kept for emergencies. The village was already bustling with activity. Children ran to school, merchants opened their shops, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Everything seemed normal every day, as if the extraordinary events of the previous day hadn't happened. But for Jack, the world had changed forever. Upon arriving home, he found Anthony on the porch with a worried expression. "Dad, where were you? I was looking for you all night." "Calm down, son. I had a small setback in the ridge, but I'm fine. I spent the night at Sarah's house." Anthony sighed, relieved and frustrated at the same time. "This has to stop, Dad. You can't keep venturing alone into the ridge at your age and condition." "My condition?" Jack felt a pang of irritation. "I'm not an invalid, Anthony, and I have responsibilities to the ridge that you wouldn't understand." "Responsibilities?" "Dad, the ridge is just a mountain. A beautiful mountain, of course, part of our history, but—" "Where's Hannah?" interrupted Jack, changing the subject. "At school. Where else would she be? It's Monday." Jack checked the old wall clock. 10 o'clock. Hannah would leave school at noon. Time enough to rest a bit before the conversation they needed to have. "We have visitors," continued Anthony, hesitant. "Engineers from Springfield. They arrived yesterday afternoon, staying at Mrs. Teresa's inn. They came to survey the ridge. They talked about a big project that could bring jobs, development to the village." Jack felt a chill. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. "The ridge is in danger." "What kind of surveys?" "Something about rare minerals, lands that could be exploited. They want to meet with the older residents, hear stories about the region. They specifically asked to speak with you." "And what did you say?" "That I would try to arrange a meeting." "Dad, this could be good for Golden Ridge. Imagine jobs for young people who now have to leave for big cities." Jack nodded vaguely, but his mind was elsewhere. If the men were interested in the region's stories, they were certainly looking for something specific. Perhaps the same secrets that the rock with inscriptions guarded. "We need to talk about this later, Anthony. Now I need to rest." His son helped him enter and settle on the old living room sofa. Jack's house was simple but full of history. Old photographs adorned the walls. He and Mary on their wedding day, Anthony as a baby, Hannah with her eternally distant gaze in various phases of childhood. On a shelf were objects he had collected over decades, unusual stones, feathers of rare birds, a worn notebook where he recorded the cycles of nature on the ridge. While resting, his thoughts wandered between the revelations of the previous day and the new threats approaching. The amulet, still in his pocket, seemed to vibrate in response to his unease. At exactly noon, he heard the front door open. Hannah entered, her light footsteps almost inaudible against the wooden floor. Upon seeing her grandfather in the living room, her eyes widened. "Grandpa, the ridge gave you back." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "How did you know I was there?" Hannah approached, sitting beside him on the sofa. For a moment, she just looked at her hands, young hands that somehow seemed to carry the same wisdom as his. "I dreamt. I saw you in the forest with the Guardian." Jack felt his heart accelerate. "What else did you see, Hannah?" "A rock with ancient drawings, trees falling, strange men digging the earth, and something hidden in the depths, something that shines like 1,000 suns, but that should remain in the shadows." The old man felt dizzy with the precision of Hannah's visions. She had never spoken so openly about her dreams before. "Why did you never tell me about these visions, my child?" Hannah lowered her gaze. "I was afraid. Dad always says they're imaginations. that I need to focus on real things like school, the future. But for me, this is real, Grandpa. It always has been. Jack took the amulet from his pocket and extended it to Hannah. Do you recognize this? The girl's eyes shone. Grandma Mary's amulet. She showed it to me once before. Her voice faltered. Before she departed, completed Jack. Hannah, everything you see, everything you feel in relation to the ridge is real. You are part of an ancient lineage, guardians who protect the land and its secrets. The men I saw in my dreams, they're here, aren't they, to destroy the ridge? They arrived yesterday, and I fear they're after something very specific, something I don't fully understand yet. Hannah took the amulet, running her fingers over the green stone in the center. What should we do? I need to return to the ridge, to the Rock of Inscriptions. And this time you come with me. But what about Dad? He'll never allow it. Jack smiled, a smile that mixed determination and a touch of youthful rebellion. Your father doesn't need to know. Not yet. Some secrets need to be kept until the right moment to be revealed. At that instant, as if responding to the silent call of the two, a distant whinny echoed from outside the house. Hannah ran to the window and saw, at the edge of the forest, the unmistakable silhouette of the Mustang. The Guardian, she whispered, amazed. It came for us. The plan was quickly drawn up. Hannah pretended to go do a school project at a friend's house, while Jack told Anthony he would spend the afternoon resting. At 2 p.m, they met at the edge of the forest, where the Mustang waited patiently for them, as if understanding the urgency of the situation. It's even more beautiful up close, murmured Hannah, approaching the animal cautiously. The horse observed her with its deep eyes, and to Jack's surprise inclined its head in a kind of reverence. It recognizes you, said the grandfather, amazed. Hannah extended her hand and touched the animal's muzzle. A current of energy ran through her body, making her step back in surprise. I felt as if it spoke to me without words. The language of the Guardians is older than words, Hannah. It comes from the earth, the air, life itself. With her granddaughter's help, Jack mounted the horse and Hannah climbed up behind him. The animal began the journey through the forest, following the same narrow and little-known path that Jack had traveled the day before. The difference was that this time, the forest seemed more alive, more vibrant. Birds sang in harmonious tones, flowers opened their petals along the trail, and even the air seemed lighter, charged with positive energy. It's as if the forest... Here's happy, commented Hannah, amazed. The ridge recognizes its guardians, responded Jack. It's welcoming us. As they advanced, Jack told his granddaughter the stories his grandfather had told him, legends about the origin of Golden Ridge, about the first peoples who inhabited those lands, about the deep connection between the mountain and its guardians. Hannah absorbed every word, as if finally finding explanations for what she had always felt, but never completely understood. Further ahead, they began to see the rock formation that housed the ancient inscriptions. A sense of reverence took hold of both. The place emanated an ancient power which could be felt on the skin itself. The horse stopped and, carefully, both dismounted. Hannah helped her grandfather position himself on a fallen trunk from where he could observe the inscriptions. The girl walked slowly to the rock, her eyes fixed on the designs engraved on the stone. They're so alive, she said, running her fingers over the engraved figures, as if they were pulsing. Jack took the amulet from his pocket and handed it, again to his granddaughter. Use this. It might help to understand. Hannah held the amulet against her chest and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a gentle wind began to blow around them, making the leaves dance in the air. The green stone in the center of the amulet began to glow, emitting a soft light that expanded gradually. When Hannah opened her eyes again, she gasped in surprise. The inscriptions on the rock seemed to have come to life. The engraved figures glowed with the same greenish light as the amulet, and it seemed they moved subtly, telling a silent story. Grandpa, I'm seeing everything, she whispered, amazed. I see the first guardians, men and women who connected with the spirits of the ridge. I see the first guardian horse, born from the very soul of the mountain, and I see something buried in the Depths. Jack leaned forward, attentive. What is it, Hannah? What's in the depths? A light. A light so strong I can barely look at it, like a piece of sun fallen to earth. The ancients protected it, hid it where no one could find it. Hannah paused, her expression changing to concern. But now there are shadows approaching, men who want to unearth what should remain hidden. The engineers, murmured Jack. They aren't after common minerals. Hannah continued, her voice now firmer, as if being guided by something beyond herself. If the light is exposed, the balance will be broken. The ridge will suffer and all life that depends on it. Suddenly, the glow of the amulet intensified, momentarily blinding them. When the light diminished, a new inscription had appeared on the rock, the figure of a man in a wheelchair and a young woman side by side with the guardian horse behind them. It's us, said Hannah, surprised. The ridge is showing us our destiny, replied Jack. We are being formally chosen as the new guardians. The horse approached and in a surprising gesture knelt before the two, as in an ancestral ceremony. Hannah and Jack felt a deep connection form between the three of them, an alliance sealed by forces older than time itself. At that moment, a sudden crack broke the enchantment. Distant voices, the sound of branches being broken. Someone was approaching along the trail. I'm sure I saw movement around here, said an unfamiliar male voice. It must be that old man they talked about, the one who knows all the secrets of the ridge. Jack and Hannah exchanged alarmed looks. The engineers had followed them. We need to go, whispered Jack. They can't find us here nor discover this place. The horse positioned itself beside them, ready for escape. With Hannah's help, Jack quickly mounted, and both departed on a different trail, denser and harder to follow. Behind them, voices approached the clearing of the sacred rock. The guardian horse led them through almost invisible trails, known only to the forest animals. Behind them, the voices of the engineers grew increasingly distant, until they disappeared completely. Only when they were sure they were safe did they slow down. We need to find out more about these men, said Jack, his voice laden with concern. What exactly they're looking for and how much they already know. Hannah, who kept the amulet secure around her neck, nodded. Let's return to the village by another route. If we're smart, we can observe them without being seen. The sun was already beginning to descend on the horizon when they reached the periphery of Golden Ridge. The horse left them at the edge of the forest, hidden among the dense trees, with a look that seemed to say it would be nearby, vigilant. Hannah helped her grandfather return to his wheelchair, which they had hidden among bushes before departing, and together they headed to the center of the village. The main square was bustling with more activity than usual. A group of well-dressed men, obviously not locals, was chatting animatedly with some residents. In the center of the group, they distinguished Anthony, gesturing enthusiastically. "My dad," whispered Hannah with a mix of disappointment and concern. Hidden under the shade of a leafy tree, they observed the scene. The engineers had set up a small improvised exhibition in the square. Maps of the region, rock samples, aerial photos of Golden Ridge, and documents that looked like preliminary projects. "We're talking about an operation that can transform Golden Ridge," said a tall man with graying hair, who seemed to lead the group. "Jobs, infrastructure, progress. Your little town can become a regional hub." "And what about the environmental impact?" questioned Mrs. Connie, the local school teacher. "The ridge is our most precious natural heritage. We'll have the smallest possible impact," assured another man, younger, with modern glasses. "Cutting-edge technology, recovery of degraded areas, and a percentage of the profits will be allocated to conservation projects. Everyone wins." Hannah and Jack exchanged skeptical looks. The promises were too big to be true. "We need to get closer," whispered Jack. "See what these maps show." With naturalness, as if they were just strolling, they approached the exhibition. Hannah pretended interest in an informational leaflet while discreetly studying the maps. Jack, in turn, approached one of the younger engineers who was working on a laptop. "Nice equipment," he commented casually. "You seem well prepared for this expedition." The young engineer smiled, proud. "Latest technology in geological prospecting. We can map the subsoil with incredible precision, locating mineral deposits at great depths." "And what exactly are..." You looking for in our ridge? The engineer hesitated for an instant, but soon recovered his professional posture. Rare minerals mainly. Rare earth elements essential for cutting-edge technology. Brazil has one of the world's largest unexploited potentials in this sector. Jack maintained a neutral expression despite growing concern. And have you found anything interesting? We detected an anomaly on the east side of the ridge, a mineral concentration like I've never seen before, but we need to investigate more, verify in loco, with the community's permission, of course. The young man smiled, confident. At that moment, Anthony spotted his father and daughter, approaching with a mix of surprise and irritation. "Dad, Hannah, what are you doing here? I thought you were resting and you should be at Julia's house," he said, looking severely at his daughter. "We heard the hubbub and came to see," replied Jack naturally. Hard to rest with so much excitement. Anthony seemed to accept the explanation, turning his attention to the grey-haired man who was approaching. "Mr. Jack Thompson, I presume. I'm Dr. Richard Morton, Chief Geologist of Progress Mining. Your son spoke a lot about you, the man who knows every inch of Golden Ridge." Jack shook the extended hand firmly, studying the man before him. There was something calculating in his gaze despite the friendly smile. "Knowing and exploiting are quite different things, Doctor." Richard laughed, apparently amused by the frankness. "A direct man, I like that. Mr. Thompson, we're very interested in your experience. There are places on the ridge that don't appear on official maps, ancient trails, peculiar rock formations." "Why the interest in peculiar rock formations?" interrupted Hannah, her voice calm but incisive. The geologist turned his attention to the girl, studying her for a moment before responding. "You must be Hannah, the prodigy granddaughter. Your father told me you also inherited the love for the ridge." Turning back to Jack, he continued, "Unusual formations can indicate past geological events which, in turn, may be associated with specific mineral deposits." Jack maintained an impassive countenance, but his mind was working quickly. They were looking for the rock with inscriptions, or perhaps what was buried beneath it, the mysterious light Hannah had seen in the visions. "The ridge has many interesting places, Doctor, but most are difficult to access, especially for someone in my current situation. I understand perfectly, but perhaps we can arrange a guided visit with all the necessary assistance to ensure your comfort and safety. We're especially interested in areas in the eastern sector." A chill ran down Jack's spine. The eastern sector, exactly where the sacred rock was. "I'll think about it, Doctor. The ridge and I have a long-standing relationship. I don't introduce it to just anyone." Richard nodded, his smile never wavering. Of course. No rush. We'll be in the village for a week. Time enough to get to know each other better." As they moved away from the square, Hannah and Jack exchanged worried looks. The siege was closing in and they needed to act quickly to protect the ridge's secrets. It was already night when Hannah and Jack arrived at Mother Sarah's house. The healer was waiting for them on the porch, as if she knew they would come. Without asking questions, she offered them herbal tea and listened attentively as they related the day's events. The visit to the sacred rock, Hannah's visions, and the encounter with the mining engineers. "So it has begun," said Sarah when they finished. "The ancient prophecy is being fulfilled." "What prophecy?" asked Hannah, her eyes shining with curiosity. Sarah rose with some difficulty and walked to an old shelf. From there, she removed a carved wooden box with the same symbols they had seen on the rock. Inside the box was a yellowed parchment, carefully rolled and protected. "This document has been passed from healer to healer in our community for generations. It's written in the ancient language of the first inhabitants of these lands, but I've learned to translate it." Sarah carefully unrolled the parchment. "It speaks of a time when strangers would come from afar, attracted by the glow of the ridge's heart. A time when the balance would be threatened, and the guardians would be called to protect the secret." "The heart of the ridge," murmured Hannah. "That's what I saw in the visions, the light buried in the depths." "The ancients called it the eternal light," explained Sarah. "A stone like no other in this world, born from the earth's core itself. They say it possesses energy to power entire cities, to cure diseases, to transform the common into extraordinary. "And that's what the mining company is looking for?" asked Jack. "They may not know exactly what it is, but their instruments have detected its energy. To them, it must seem just an unusual mineral deposit, extremely valuable." "But why must it remain hidden?" questioned Hannah. "If it has so much power, couldn't it be used for good?" Sarah smiled sadly. "The eternal light doesn't belong to this world, child. It's a fragment of something greater, older than humanity itself. In the wrong hands, its power could cause unimaginable destruction. The ancients buried it in the depths of the ridge and created the Guardians to protect it through the ages. And now it's us," concluded Jack, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We need to prevent them from finding the sacred rock," said Hannah. "If they find it, they'll discover the path to the eternal light." Silence took over the room as the three reflected on the gravity of the situation. It was Jack who first spoke, his voice laden with determination. "We can't simply turn away the engineers. They have permissions, government support probably. If they can't get what they want the easy way, they'll return with more force." "Then, what do you suggest, Grandpa?" "We need to deceive them, make them believe they're looking in the wrong place." Hannah nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "A false trail." "Exactly. I'll offer to guide them as they asked, but I'll take them to the west side of the ridge, where there are similar rock formations, but no sign of the eternal light." "That will only delay the inevitable," warned Sarah. "With their equipment, they'll eventually discover the truth." "Unless we have a bigger plan," said Hannah thoughtfully, biting her lip. "What if we could interfere with their equipment, create false readings?" "How would we do that?" questioned Jack. "The amulet," replied Hannah, touching the green stone on her chest. "It channels the ridge's energy. Maybe we can use it to create interference, confuse them." Sarah considered the idea. "It's possible. The amulet was created for communication with the forest spirits, but its energy can affect sensitive instruments if used correctly." "We would need access to their equipment," said Jack, "and that won't be easy." "Leave that to me," offered Hannah. "Nobody suspects a curious teenager. I can approach them, show interest in the scientific work." "It's risky," worried the grandfather. "No more than letting them find the eternal light," countered Hannah. "Besides, I have the amulet. It will protect me." Sarah moved to a table where dried herbs were organized in small pots. She began to mix some of them in a small mortar. "I'll prepare a potion that will increase the amulet's energy. Hannah, you must carry it always. And when you're near their equipment, concentrate on protecting the ridge. The amulet will respond to your intent." "And while Hannah approaches the younger engineers, I'll offer to guide Dr. Richard," completed Jack. "I'll keep his attention away from the east side as much as possible." "There's one more thing we need to do," said Sarah, her expression grave. "The strengthening ritual. To formally seal the pact between you and the Guardian, increasing your protective powers." "What ritual is that?" asked Hannah. "It must be performed under the full moon, in the clearing near the sacred rock. We'll need the Guardian present, and the elements of the earth." "The next full moon is in 3 days," remembered Jack. "Time enough to prepare everything," agreed Sarah. "Until then, follow the plan. Approach the engineers, gain their trust, divert their attention." While Sarah finished preparing the potion for the amulet, Hannah and Jack remained silent, each absorbed in their own thoughts. The responsibility they carried was immense, but there was also a sense of purpose, of belonging to something greater than themselves. Outside, the night was clear, starry, and at the edge of the forest, invisible to ordinary eyes, the Guardian horse watched, patient and attentive, awaiting the call of its chosen ones. The next morning, the village of Golden Ridge was bustling with the presence of the outsiders. The mining company had set up a small tent in the central square, where they distributed leaflets about the project and collected signatures of support from residents. The promise of jobs and economic development won over many, especially the younger ones who saw in the project a chance to remain in the region instead of migrating to big cities. Jack observed everything from his porch, his heart heavy. He had spent his entire life watching the village struggle against oblivion, against the exodus of young people, against the lack of opportunities. He couldn't blame his neighbors for getting excited about the engineer's promises. They didn't know what was really at stake. Anthony appeared at the door, interrupting his thoughts. "Dad, Dr. Richard is coming to see you. He said he wanted to talk personally about the possibility of you guiding them through the ridge." Jack nodded, composing his best expression of neutrality. "I'm ready to receive him." A few minutes later, the gray-haired geologist entered the porch, accompanied by a young assistant who carried maps and equipment. Richard greeted Jack with a firm handshake and a calculatedly friendly smile. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for receiving me. Your son mentioned that you're practically a living legend in this region." "Legends tend to be exaggerated, Doctor. I'm just an old man who spent too much time in the woods." Richard laughed, settling into the chair Anthony offered. "Modesty aside, we're really interested in your experience. Even with all our technology, nothing replaces the knowledge of someone who's lived a lifetime connected to a place." While the men talked on the porch, Hannah was putting her part of the plan into action. She had approached the tent in the square, where the younger engineer they had seen the day before, Daniel, was supervising the installation of some equipment. "What? An interesting machine," she commented, feigning casual curiosity. "What does it do exactly?" Daniel looked up, surprised and visibly pleased with the young woman's interest. "It's a precision magnetometer. It detects anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field that may indicate specific mineral deposits." "It seems complex," said Hannah, moving closer, the amulet hidden under her blouse. "Have you been studying geology for a long time?" "I finished my doctorate last year," he replied proudly. "I specialized in rare minerals and high-performance conductive materials." The conversation flowed easily, and Hannah was surprised by her own ability to extract information without seeming suspicious. In a short time, she was sitting beside Daniel as he enthusiastically explained the preliminary maps they had made of the region. "This area here," he pointed to the east side of the ridge, exactly where the sacred rock was, "presents very unusual readings. There's something down there that doesn't fit any known mineral profile." Hannah felt the amulet warm against her chest. She concentrated, as Sarah had taught, visualizing the ridge's energy flowing through her, subtly interfering with the nearby equipment. The magnetometer on the table beside them began to emit irregular sounds. "Strange," murmured Daniel, checking the device. "It was working perfectly just now." "Maybe it's the ridge's energy," Hannah suggested innocently. "My grandfather always says this place has its own force that sometimes affects electronic devices." Daniel seemed to consider the idea, readjusting the equipment. "Could be. We've been encountering interference since we arrived. I've never seen anything like this in other research locations." On Jack's porch, the conversation was also advancing, according to plan. The old guardian had agreed to take Richard and his team for an exploration of the ridge, but suggested starting with the west side. "There are fascinating rock formations over there," he explained. "Caves with rock paintings, structures that geologists would love to study." "We're more interested in the eastern sector initially," countered Richard. "Our readings indicate significant anomalies in that area." Jack maintained a neutral expression, despite the internal alarm. "The east is harder to access, especially for someone in a wheelchair. I thought of starting with the more accessible, so you could get to know the terrain well." Before Richard could insist, Daniel appeared hurriedly, interrupting the conversation. "Doctor, we have a problem with the readings," he said, extending a tablet with confusing graphs. "The magnetic map has completely changed since yesterday." Richard frowned, examining the data. "What do you mean, changed?" "The anomaly we detected in the east has practically disappeared, but now we have very strong readings coming from the west side," explained Daniel, confused. Hannah, who had discreetly followed Daniel, remained at a safe distance, the amulet glowing almost imperceptibly under her blouse. Her heart raced when she realized Jack was watching her with a slight smile of understanding. "Interesting," commented the old man. "Perhaps it's a sign that we should start with the west after all." Richard studied the new data, visibly frustrated, but trying to maintain composure. "Very well, Mr. Thompson. We'll follow your suggestion. When can we start this exploration?" "Tomorrow at dawn would be ideal. The heat is less intense in the morning." After the engineers left, Anthony looked at his father with suspicion. "You're plotting something, aren't you? I saw how you looked at Hannah. You two are up to something." Jack sighed. His son was too observant for his own good. "Anthony, there are things about the ridge that you don't understand, things that Hannah and I are obligated to protect." "Obligated? By whom?" "Dad, don't come at me with these mystical stories now. We're talking about the future of the village, real opportunities." "Not all that glitters is gold, my son, and not all progress is beneficial." Anthony shook his head, frustrated. "What did you and Hannah do? Why did the readings change so suddenly?" "Ask your daughter," replied Jack calmly. "Maybe it's time for you to hear what she has to say, to really listen to her." That night, a heavy tension hung over the family's house. Anthony confronted Hannah about her proximity to the engineers and her apparent involvement in her grandfather's craziness, as he called it. The heated discussion ended with Hannah locked in her room, and Anthony leaving furiously into the night, probably heading to the village bar. When all was quiet, Hannah discreetly opened her window. The crescent moon partially illuminated the sky, and she could feel the ridge's call stronger than ever. The amulet on her chest emitted a soft, pulsating glow, as if responding to some invisible call. At the edge of the forest, she saw the familiar silhouette of the guardian horse. It watched her patiently, waiting. Hannah understood the message. It was time to prepare for the full moon ritual, just 2 days ahead. Silently, she descended through the window, using the old oak that grew beside the house. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt a deep connection with the earth, as if invisible roots linked her to the heart of the ridge. The horse approached, majestic in the half-light, and lowered itself slightly, inviting her to mount. "Take me to Grandpa," she whispered, caressing the animal's mane. "We need to settle the final details." The guardian whinnied softly and departed in a gentle gallop through the night, taking Hannah on paths known only to the ancient spirits of the forest. As she rode, the young woman kept in her heart the certainty that, however difficult it might be, she was following the path that had been destined for her since birth. The day dawned with a thick mist covering Golden Ridge, as if nature itself wanted to hide its secrets. As agreed, Jack guided Richard and his team through the western side of the mountain, showing them ancient caves and interesting rock formations, but nothing that compared to the true source of energy they were trying to protect. The engineers recorded everything meticulously, collected samples and took measurements, but Jack noticed the growing frustration in their eyes. The magnetic anomalies that their equipment had detected seemed to move, appear and disappear inexplicably, always leading them away from the eastern side. "It's as if the mountain is playing with us," commented Daniel, adjusting his instruments for the 10th time. "The ridge has its own time and will," replied Jack, hiding a smile. "Not everything can be measured or understood by your machines, young man." Hannah, for her part, had managed to convince her father to let her accompany some of the younger engineers in their data collection. With the amulet always close to her chest, she continued to subtly interfere with the readings, creating false trails and concealing the true location of the ancient energy. At the end of the day, when everyone returned to the village, exhausted and frustrated, they learned that Dr. Richard had been called back to the capital for an urgent meeting. He would depart the next morning, leaving the team under Daniel's command for 2 days. "This is our chance," whispered Hannah to her grandfather as they observed the activity in the square. "The full moon is tomorrow night. With their boss away, it will be easier for us to perform the ritual without being discovered." Jack nodded, his expression grave. "We have to tell Sarah to prepare everything. The ritual needs to be performed exactly at midnight, when the moon is at its highest point." That night, while the village slept, the 3 guardians, Jack, Hannah and Mother Sarah, gathered at the healer's house for final preparations. The old wooden table was covered with herbs, crystals, natural pigments, and the prophecy, parchment. "The strengthening ritual hasn't been performed in more than 70 years, explained Sarah, carefully separating the necessary elements. "That's how your grandfather officially became the guardian, Jack, And now the time has come to pass the legacy forward. To me and Hannah, he completed, thoughtful. Yes, the first case of simultaneous guardians on record. But the times are exceptional, and the threat to the eternal light greater than ever. Sarah handed Hannah a small leather pouch with engraved symbols. Place this under your pillow tonight. It will prepare your spirit for the ritual. The girl accepted the object with reverence. And what about Grandpa? He's already undergone his own preparation many years ago, even without knowing it. When he lost the movement in his legs, the ridge marked him. Connecting him more deeply to it, it was both a trial and a gift. Jack smiled melancholically. I always thought the accident was the worst thing in my life. How wrong I was. The ridge never takes without giving something in return, affirmed Sarah. And tomorrow both of you will receive more than you imagine. The following afternoon, Hannah discreetly left school before the last bell, avoiding meeting her father, who would certainly ask questions. The atmosphere was tense between them since their argument, and Anthony was spending more and more time with the engineers, discussing future business possibilities when mining began. Upon reaching her grandfather's house, she found him already prepared, with a small backpack containing everything they would need for the ritual. Without exchanging many words, they set off toward the forest. The guardian horse was waiting for them at the same spot as always, at the edge of the woods. This time, besides it, there were other forest animals, colorful birds, small rodents, even a majestic deer watching from a distance. It was as if all wildlife was aware of the importance of that night. The animals sense it, explained Jack, noticing his granddaughter's amazed look. They know something important is going to happen, something that will affect the entire ridge. The climb to the clearing with the sacred rock was smooth, as if the mountain itself was facilitating their passage. The sun was beginning to set when they arrived, tinting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Sarah was already waiting for them, having arrived earlier to prepare the site. The healer had arranged crystals in a circle around the rock with inscriptions. Dried herbs burned in small, ceramic containers, releasing an aromatic smoke that seemed to dance in the air. In the center of the circle, she had drawn the same symbols that appeared on the rock and on the amulet, using natural pigments. Now we wait, she said, indicating a space for them to sit. The ritual can only begin when the moon is high. The hours passed slowly. They ate some of the fruit they had brought and drank a tea prepared by Sarah, which induced a state of tranquility and mental clarity. As darkness took over the forest, the night sounds grew in intensity. Crickets, frogs, the distant hooting of owls. Finally, the full moon appeared imposing in the sky, bathing the clearing with its silvery light. It was time. Come to the Yi. Circle, instructed Sarah. Hannah helped her grandfather position himself, and both sat on opposite sides of the central drawing. Sarah began to chant an ancient song, in a language that neither of them knew but which somehow seemed familiar, as if it were part of their ancestral memories. The amulet on Hannah's neck began to glow, responding to the growing energy in the place. The rock with inscriptions also emitted a soft glow, as if awakening from a long sleep. Place your hands on the symbols, directed Sarah between chants. As soon as they touched the painted ground, a current of energy ran through their bodies. Hannah gasped, feeling connected not just to the ridge, but to generations of guardians who came before her. Quick visions passed through her mind, ancient peoples, forgotten rituals, the eternal light being buried in the depths of the mountain. Jack was also experiencing something extraordinary. A sensation of intense heat rose from his legs, spreading throughout his entire body. It was as if each cell was being recharged, reinvigorated by an ancient and benevolent power. The guardian horse approached, positioning itself behind them, forming a perfect triangle with Sarah. The animal whinnied, a melodious sound that echoed through the forest, and in response, the earth beneath them trembled slightly. The ridge recognizes its guardians, declared Sarah, her voice now different, deeper, as if other voices were speaking through her. The pact is sealed. From this night forward, Your destinies are irrevocably linked to the protection of the eternal light. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Jack felt an intense tingling in his legs, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Without realizing what he was doing, he supported his hands on the ground and began to rise, first one leg, then the other. "Grandpa," whispered Hannah, with tears in her eyes. "You're standing." Trembling slightly but firm, Jack was standing for the first time in decades. It wasn't a permanent miracle. He knew that instinctively, but a temporary gift from the ridge, a physical manifestation of the power that now ran in his veins. "The ritual is complete," announced Sarah, with a serene smile. "You have been accepted as the new guardians of the eternal light. The ridge has granted you its blessing and its gifts." As they absorbed the magnitude of the moment, a distant noise broke the tranquility of the night. Human voices approaching, flashlights cutting through the darkness of the forest. "The engineers," alerted Hannah, alarmed. "How did they find us?" Jack, still amazed by his ability to stand, quickly returned to reality. "We need to leave. They can't find us in this place." The guardian horse whinnied nervously, indicating an escape route between the dense trees. But before they could move, a figure emerged from the darkness, blocking their exit. "I knew it," said the familiar voice, laden with anger and disappointment. "I knew you two were plotting something." It was Anthony, followed closely by Daniel and two other engineers, all carrying flashlights and measurement equipment. Time seemed to freeze in that moonlit clearing. Anthony stared at his father and daughter with a mixture of anger and confusion, while the engineers behind him looked fascinated at the scene before them. The crystals arranged in a circle, the rock with glowing inscriptions, and above all, Jack, the man everyone knew as wheelchair-bound, inexplicably standing. How are you standing?" stammered Anthony, momentarily forgetting his indignation. Jack felt his legs beginning to weaken. The temporary effect of the ritual was dissipating. "Son, there are things you need to understand. Things about our family, about our connection to this ridge." "The connection is real," interrupted Daniel, stepping forward, his eyes fixed on the rock with inscriptions. "The equipment wasn't malfunctioning. The energy is here, exactly where our original measurements indicated." The young engineer raised a device that emitted a constant and growing sound as he moved it closer to the rock. "It's the most powerful source we've ever detected. It must be just below this formation. We need to communicate with Dr. Richard immediately," said one of the other engineers, already taking out his cell phone. "We have to start excavations as soon as possible." "No!" exclaimed Hannah, positioning herself between the men and the sacred rock. The amulet on her neck was glowing intensely now, responding to her agitation. "You don't understand what's at stake. What's buried here cannot be removed." Daniel looked at the amulet with scientific curiosity. "That stone, it's the reason for the interferences in our equipment, isn't it? You've been deceiving us all. This time." Hannah didn't deny it. Her defiant gaze met her father's, silently begging for understanding. "We did what needed to be done to protect the ridge, to protect everyone." "Protect from what, Hannah?" asked Anthony, exasperated. "This is our opportunity for development, for a future, or for destruction," intervened Mother Sarah, who until then had remained silent, observing. "Your father and your daughter are the ridge's chosen ones, Anthony, the guardians of the eternal light. And you also carry that legacy in your blood, for even if you've ignored it for so long." Anthony shook his head, refusing to accept. "I won't allow your superstitions to interfere with our village's progress. Daniel, you have authorization to begin preliminary work here. I will personally guarantee the community's support." "Son, please," implored Jack, now supported by Hannah, his legs weak again. "You don't know what you're doing." The Guardian horse, which had kept its distance during the confrontation, suddenly advanced, positioning itself beside the Guardians. Its imposing presence made the engineers instinctively back away. "What animal is that?" asked one of them, alarmed. "It's the Guardian," responded Jack. "Part of the ridge as much as the rocks and trees. It saved me when I thought my end had come, and now it's here to protect what must remain protected. As he spoke, the earth beneath their feet began to tremble slightly. It wasn't a violent tremor, but a rhythmic pulsing, like a heart beating, in the depths. "What's happening?" asked Daniel, his scientific fascination momentarily overcoming fear. "The eternal light responds to the presence of intentions," explained Sarah. "It senses danger, the threat of being exposed." The tremor gradually increased. Small stones began to jump on the ground, and the air became charged with a palpable static energy. The engineer's equipment crackled and flashed erratically. "We need to get out of here," shouted one of the men, already retreating to the trail. But Daniel remained, hypnotized by the phenomenon. "It's incredible. The energy is physically manifesting." Suddenly, the rock with inscriptions cracked in half. With a deafening snap, an intense light, golden and pulsating, escaped through the crevice, illuminating the entire clearing with a supernatural glow. "The eternal light," whispered Hannah, amazed and terrified at the same time. "It's revealing itself." The energy emanating from the rock was so intense that everyone felt its heat, a sensation not of burning but of pure, concentrated, ancient life. For a brief moment, each person in the clearing experienced visions, flashes of the ridge's past, of its formation, of the peoples who venerated it, of the secrets it kept. Anthony stumbled backward, dazed by the images flooding his mind. He saw his grandfather, whom he had barely known, performing the same ritual decades ago. He saw his father, young and strong, connecting with the mountain. He saw himself as a child, feeling that same energy he now denied. "I always knew," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "Deep down, I always knew there was something more." The light pulsed once, twice, and then began to slowly retract into the crevice in the rock. The tremors diminished, and the air returned to normal, though a sense of residual power still persisted in the environment. Jack, who was observing his son attentively, noticed the change in his countenance. "The ridge is speaking to you, Anthony. It's reminding you of who you really are." Daniel, still fascinated by the phenomenon, approached the now partially closed rock from which a soft glow still escaped. "This is impossible. No known form of energy behaves like this. This defies everything we know about physics and geology." "Some things were not made to be understood by science, young man," said Sarah, gently moving him away from the rock. "And they certainly weren't made to be exploited as resources." The young engineer looked at his equipment, now completely useless due to the energy pulse. Suddenly, he seemed very young and insecure. "Dr. Richard won't believe this. He'll want to excavate, extract, study, and destroy everything in the process," completed Hannah, "including the village you promised to develop." Silence fell over the group as everyone absorbed what they had witnessed. It was Anthony who finally broke the silence. His voice transformed, as if something fundamental had changed within him. "You won't excavate here," he declared, surprising everyone. "This area is protected by environmental and cultural laws. My father is the official caretaker of these lands, designated by the municipality. Without his authorization, you have no permission for anything beyond observational studies." Daniel frowned. "But you yourself were supporting the project until now." "I was wrong," admitted Anthony, looking at his father and daughter with regret. "There are things more important than economic progress. There are legacies that need to be preserved." The other engineers, still shaken by the phenomenon they had witnessed, seemed more than willing to leave the place. Only Daniel hesitated, divided between scientific curiosity and respect for what clearly transcended current understanding. "What you saw," said Jack, addressing him, "was just a glimpse of the ridge's true power. A power that exists in balance with everything around it. Extracting it would be like tearing the heart out of a living being." Hannah approached the young engineer. "You can choose, Daniel. You can report what you saw, be part of protecting this place, or you can try to convince others to exploit it, but know that the ridge will always protect itself." After a long moment of reflection, Daniel slowly nodded. "I'll say we found nothing conclusive, that the readings were wrong, that there's no economic viability." "A wise choice," approved Sarah. When the engineers left, only the family remained in the clearing. Jack, now again dependent on physical support, Hannah, the amulet still glowing softly around her neck, and Anthony, transformed by the experience, rediscovering the connection he had buried within himself for so long. "I'm sorry," he said, embracing his father and daughter. "I should have believed you." "What matters is that you believe now," replied Jack, a deep peace in his voice. "The lineage of guardians remains intact." The guardian horse approached, observing them with its deep and wise eyes. To everyone's surprise, it slightly bowed before Anthony, recognizing him as part of the circle of protection. "What happens now?" asked Anthony. "Now we continue," replied Hannah, holding her father's and grandfather's hands. "We continue to protect, to learn, to pass on what we know, as it always has been, as it always will be." Together, they observed the full moon bathing the ridge with its silvery light. The crack in the rock had closed almost completely, leaving only a thin thread of golden light escaping, like a reminder of the power it guarded. The amulet on Hannah's neck pulsed in the same rhythm, a tangible connection with the heart of the mountain. In the weeks that followed, Progress Mining discreetly withdrew from Golden Ridge. Official reports mentioned technical unfeasibility and inconclusive data as reasons for abandoning the project. Daniel kept his word, though he occasionally sent messages to Hannah, asking about the ridge, about the phenomena he had witnessed, seeking to understand within the limits of respect for what was sacred. The village continued its tranquil life, unaware of the danger it had faced. Gradually, other development opportunities emerged: an ecotourism project, a natural products cooperative, initiatives that respected the ridge's integrity. Jack returned to his routine of daily visits to the forest, now frequently accompanied by Anthony and Hannah. The trails they traveled together were more than physical paths. They were the reconnection of a lineage, the continuity of an ancestral tradition. On full moon nights, the three gathered with Mother Sarah in the clearing of the sacred rock, strengthening the bond with the ridge, learning ancient knowledge, preparing for the day when new challenges would arise, because they would eventually come. The outside world would continue to seek riches, to exploit resources, to threaten the ancient balance. But Golden Ridge now had its guardians, not just one, but 3 generations united in purpose and love for the land that had chosen them. And at the edge of the forest, vigilant as always, the guardian horse remained, a living symbol of the connection between worlds, between the visible and invisible, between past and future. And the eternal light, the mountain's beating heart, continued to shine in the depths, secure in the protective embrace of the earth, its secret preserved for generations yet to come.